بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وإمام المرسلين سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل، وجعلنا من خيرة أمة سيدنا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد كما تحب وترضى بأن تصلي عليه. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه: إن لله عز وجل 99 اسما، 100 إلا واحدة، إنه وتر يحب الوتر، من أحصاها دخل الجنة، وهو هكذا. والله الذي لا إله إلا هو الرحمن الرحيم الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر الخالق البارئ المصور الغفار القهار الوهاب الرزاق الفتاح العليم القابض الباسط الخافض الرافع المعز المذل السميع البصير الحكم العدل اللطيف الخبير الحليم العظيم الغفور الشكور العلي الكبير الحفيظ المقيت الحسيب الجليل الكريم الرقيب المجيب الواسع الحكيم الودود المجيد البائث الشهيد الحق الوكيل القوي المتين الولي الحميد المحصي المبدئ المعيد المحيي المميت الحي القيوم الواجد الماجد الواحد الأحد الصمد القادر المقتدر المقدم المؤخر الأول الآخر الظاهر الباطن الوالي متعالي البر التواب المنتقم العفو الرؤوف مالك الملك ذو الجلال والإكرام المقسط الجامع الغني المغني المانع المضار النافع النور الهادي البديع الباقي الوارث الرشيد الصبور. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. So this is meant to be our very short read-through of the names of Allah. It's obviously not as short as you might have thought, but it is what it is. So the next name is Al-Mujib. Is that correct? Name number 45, Al-Mujib. هو الذي يقابل المسألة السائلين بالإسعاف، ودعاء الداعين بالإجابة، وضرورة المضطرين بالكفاية، فلينعم قبل النداء ويتفضل قبل الدعاء، وليس ذلك إلا الله عز وجل. فإنه يعلم حاجة المحتاجين قبل سؤالهم، وقد علمها في الأزل، فدبر أسباب كفاية الحاجات بخلق الأطعمة والأقوات، وتيسير الأسباب والآلات الموصلة إلى جميع المهمات. Very beautiful explanation by Imam Ghazali. Al-Mujib, the answer of prayers, or the answerer. Mujib al-Da'awat is the answer of prayers. Allah is Al-Mujib, He is the answerer. Okay? The one who responds, or the responder. The one who responds to the requests of those who ask by assisting them, to the call of those who call upon Him by answering them, and to the plight of the needy when the plight of those in difficulty, let's say the muttarreen, by sufficing them. In fact, He bestows His blessings before the request has even been asked. He grants favors even before the entreaty has come. But that belongs to God alone, for He knows the needs of the needy before they even ask. Indeed, He knew them in pre-eternity. So He arranged the sources sufficient to their needs by creating food and provision, by facilitating both causes and the means of fulfilling all those needs. Okay? And that's really all there is, I think, for the time being to say about that. Allah is the one who answers before being asked. Yeah. So He knows your need before you know your need, and He has fulfilled your need before you've even asked for the need to be fulfilled. But at the same time, Allah is responsive. Okay? He's not merely responding, He is responsive. Right? He can be asked. Right? Because there is a difference. You could imagine this in a family situation, if you like, child and parents. Okay? It's one thing for the parents to have provided everything that the child needs. Okay? Which is what parents do. I think all parents pretty much do that. They provide what the child needs. It's quite another thing to be responsive to the child. So when the child feels free to ask. Okay, and that entails a degree of empathy, right? It's important to understand, and sometimes we fail to understand these things. It's not about the solution; it's about being able to present the problem. Yeah, that is a need. Sometimes it's a need. You need to ask. You don't even sometimes need to be answered. You just need to ask. You just need to know that someone's listening. So Al-Mujib is linked to Ar-Razaq. It's linked to Al-Wahhab, those attributes of Allah, the giving attributes of Allah. But at the same time, it is linked to As-Sami'. It's linked to Al-Khabir. That Allah is the one who hears. And He hears the entreaties of those who call upon Him. And this is where these names of Allah are very important for us. It's very important for us to really contemplate them and grasp these subtleties and these nuances, and to understand what names are linked to what names in what way, but also how they differ, what the subtle differences are. Okay, so Allah hears, we know that He is As-Sami', and Allah gives, we know that He's Al-Wahhab, and Allah provides, we know that He's Al-Razaq. So what does Al-Mujib add to that? And Al-Mujib, just as As-Sami' is an attribute of transcendence, Al-Mujib is an attribute of immanence. God is with you when you are asking. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. When my servant asks of me, then I am indeed close. Ujibu. Al-Mujib, yujib. Ujibu da'wat al-da'i idha da'an. I hear and respond to the call of those who supplicate at the time of their supplication. فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي. So let them also seek to respond to me. وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي. And believe in me. لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشُدُونَ. In order that they might be guided. Okay? So this is Al-Mujib. As Ghazali continues, man needs to be responsive to his Lord. Yeah? Man needs to be responsive to his Lord. ينبغي أن يكون مجيبا أولا لربه تعالى. Okay. ثم لعباده, and then to the servants of God. All right. Okay. Let's move on. Al-Wasi'. Ghazali says, مشتق من السعة. It's derived from si'a, which is both expansiveness but also expansive generosity. It's having والسعة تضاف مرة إلى العلم وإذا اتسع وأحاط بالمعلومات الكثيرة وتضاف أخرى إلى الإحسان وبسط النعم. Okay, so he says that si'a, there are two basic senses of the word si'a, expansiveness. The first of them is in terms of knowledge, when knowledge extends to and comprehends a multitude of objects. And si'a is also linked to the question of giving. Okay, when it's linked to generosity, the wide bestowal of blessings that extend as far as is possible. So absolutely vast is God. So the absolutely vast is God. And the ultimate si'ah is with Allah, whose knowledge encompasses all things. Okay, Ghazali says, وَالْوَاسِعُ الْمُطْلَقُ هُوَ Allah. The true vast one. Yeah, I'll try to think of the right word, but the true vast, the phrase used in the translation here is vast. I don't particularly like vast, but okay. The true expansive one is God. لأنه إن نظر إلى علمه فلا ساحل لبحر معلوماته. Because if one looks towards his knowledge, then there's no farther shore to his ocean. It's the ocean of his knowledge. It is an infinite ocean with no shore. بل تنفد البحار, as mentioned in the Quran, تنفد البحار لو كانت مدادا لكلماته. Rather, the oceans would be exhausted if they were containers for his words. وإن نظر إلى إحسانه ونعمه فلا نهاية لمقدوراته. And if one looks towards the meaning of si'ah being in terms of generosity and giving, that is to the extent of one's power. And there is no end to God's power. There's no limit to God's power. وكل سعة فإن عظمت فتنتهي إلى الضر. Every other power, no matter how great, reaches a limit at some point. والذي لا ينتهي إلى ضربه فهو أحق باسم السعة. But the one who has no limit, who has no farther shore, is more deserving of the name Si'ah, or of Wasi', the one who is vastly expansive. Okay? Okay. So you can see the clear link between this and Al-Mujib. Okay? That God is not only one who is responsive, but God is responsive to all, because his knowledge extends to all. And God is not only giving, but God is giving to all, because his generosity and his blessings are limited only by his power, and his power is infinite. Okay? So Allah is Al-Wasi'. Okay? Ghazali continues. Now God is the absolutely vast. Everything that is vast is confined by comparison with what is yet more vast. For every expansiveness comes up against limits. And for every expansiveness which comes up against limits, additions to it may still be conceived. Yet it is inconceivable for anything to be added to what is without limit or boundary. So, فالله هو الماسي المطلق لأن كل واسع بالإضافة إلى ما هو أوسع منه ضيق وكل سعة تنتهي إلى الطرف فالزيادة عليه متصور وما لا نهاية له ولا طرف فلا يتصور عليه زيادة. This statement is an interesting statement in that it relates to, or you can see the DNA in here of what is known in the Western world as Thomas Anselm's ontological argument. God is that which than which no greater can be imagined. Okay, God is that greater than whom cannot be imagined. Yeah, and Ghazali is making a similar argument here. What Anselm is saying is that we have the ability to compare things with one another. Okay, so that this pen is, or this table is big, this table is bigger. Right, that table is bigger than both of them, and so forth. Now there must be something that is the biggest. There must be the biggest table, or the biggest thing. You are good, I am better. Someone is even better than me, but there must at some point be something that is better than everything else. That is akbar. Put that another way. That is akbar. Yeah, that being whose perfection cannot be topped by a greater perfection, that being is God. Yeah, that entity is God, that thing is God. Okay, in order to be that to which nothing possible can be added, okay, you can't add more greatness to it, you can't add more perfection to it. The perfections can only be infinite, because infinity is defined as a number that cannot be added to. Okay, so this definition is interesting because it's very close to what would become later on. Thomas Anselm was 13th century, Ghazali was 11th century, but this idea of that being firstly having to exist, so the being must exist, okay, because there has to be something that is greatest. If you take everything in existence, there has to be something that has the most knowledge, that has the most power, that has etc., etc., etc. Yeah, that being is God. Right? Ghazali takes this one step further, or I mean, Anselm says it as well, but it's not just about actual existence, it's about, or actual, ability or knowledge or what have you, it's about potential. Not just is it of all things in existence, the thing with the most knowledge or the thing with the most power, it is all things that are possible to exist, the thing that has the most power, the thing that has them, and so on and so forth. So so you can see how that argument can develop. Ghazali develops it in the context. He doesn't actually mention that in the context in his theological works, but he mentions it here in this meaning of Al-Wasi. Okay. The next is Al-Hakim. ذو الحكمة. والحكمة عبارة عن معرفة أفضل الأشياء بأفضل العلوم وأجل الأشياء هو الله سبحانه. وقد سبق أنه لا يعرف كهن معرفته غيره وهو حكيم الحق، لأنه يعلم أجل الأشياء بأجل العلوم، إذ أجل العلوم هو العلم الأزلي الدائم الذي لا يتصور زواله، والمطابق للمعلوم مطابقة لا يتطرق إليه خفاء ولا شبهة ولا يتصف بذلك إلا علم الله. So Ghazali says the wise, Al-Hakim is the wise. The word hikmah the word hakama has two basic meanings. One linked to the concept of arranging, ordering, and so forth, which we looked at in Al-Hakam. Okay, so we said Al-Hakam is linked to Al-Adl, all right, which is about placing things in a precise order. We spoke about things like the laws of nature. We had quite a long discussion about things like the laws of nature and the greater Sharia, as Badi'u Zaman Sa'id Nursi calls it, and so forth, if you remember. But the other meaning of Al-Hakam is linked to the idea of knowledge. Okay, and here we have Al-Hakim. Okay, the one possessed of wisdom. Okay, and it says wisdom is to know the relative rankings of things. Afdalul Ashya. It's to know how things relate to one another. The Afdalil Ulum, to the highest modes of knowing. The most sublime of all things, Afdalul Ashya, or Ajalul Ashya, is Allah. Okay, and we've seen before that none other than He can truly know Him. Okay, so if wisdom is to know the highest of things, the greatest of things, all right, in the most perfect possible way, and what you have here, Allah being Al-Hakim, means first and foremost that God knows Himself. And only the Hakim can know Allah. Only one who is Hakim can know Allah. Okay, who is truly Hakim can know Allah. He is truly wise. He is truly Hakim because He knows the most sublime things by the most sublime modes of knowing. The most sublime mode of knowledge is eternal, everlasting knowledge, whose extinction is inconceivable, and which corresponds to other modes of knowing in a way that admits no doubt or concealment. Only the knowledge of God is so qualified. Indeed, one who is proficient in the fine arts of craftsmanship and has mastered them to become skilled at fabricating is called wise. Yet perfection in that also belongs to God, the alone most high, the most high alone, for he is truly wise. So here Ghazali is linking the notion of hikmah, God's hikmah, to perfection of knowledge. Both perfection in terms of what God knows, but also perfection in terms of how God knows it. Okay? So, knowing the highest of all things, and remember Ghazali here is coming from a context where philosophy is a real thing in the Muslim world, and a philosopher is called a Hakim. A philosopher is Hakim. Okay? Why is a philosopher called Hakim? Why does a PhD stand for Doctor of Philosophy? Your PhD might be in engineering. Why are you a Doctor of Philosophy? Your PhD might be in marketing strategies. Why are you a Doctor of Philosophy? You may know nothing at all about philosophy, and yet nonetheless you are called a Doctor of Philosophy. What does doctor mean? What does the word doctor mean? Do you know what the word doctor means? How long have you been a doctor? Never checked it. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah.
Is it how Indians say actor?
Doctor. What does the word doctor mean? Docto in Latin, to teach. The doctor is a teacher. That's why Dr. Fahad and I, Dr. Anika and I, are not real doctors. We're not real doctors. We're medics or dentists. Yeah, a real doctor is someone who has a PhD. Why? Because they can teach the philosophy of their field. That's the idea. Yeah, that not just have you. Now, originally, of course, people who did PhDs actually studied philosophy because philosophy was the highest of all intellectual pursuits. Yeah, the idea, in the medieval period, the idea of you being a doctor of marketing strategies would be ridiculous, completely insane. Okay, but the idea is that the person with the PhD has mastered the highest modes of their subject, has attained the highest knowledge of their subject. Hence is Hakim. Hence is Hakim. Okay? So from that perspective, what are we saying? That what is it that when you become a Hakim, you're not a Faqih. So a Faqih has mastered law. Big deal. Big deal. Law's easy. Yeah? You've mastered philosophy. You've mastered the study of universals. Right? You've mastered effectively. What you now understand are universals. Okay? You understand the concept of humans not as a collection of individual beings, but as a concept, the rational animal. Right? And so forth. You understand the jins. Okay? You understand how these things fit together. This is a Hakim. And Ghazali is explaining Al-Hakim, the fact that Allah is Al-Hakim, which in the 11th century might well have been translated as the philosopher. The philosopher, right? The one who knows the reality of things. The one who knows the kuhan of things. Right? The kuhan is the essence of the thing. Okay? The mahiyya, the ultimate reality of a thing. And Ghazali is saying, if the Hakim is the one who knows, who understands the highest forms of knowledge in the best possible ways, right, in the highest or the most sublime possible ways, then what can possibly be greater than knowing God, which is the highest of all things, hence God knowing himself, and knowing himself with a knowledge that is pre-eternal and infinite, that does not it's not added to. It can't, you don't add, there's no addition to it by learning. There's not something that you didn't know before that you know now. There's not something that you know now but you won't know in the future. Right? So the one who truly deserves the title Al-Hakim is Allah. Right? Hence, the knowledge that he bestows through revelation must be hikmah. Must be hikmah. Hence, revelation takes precedence over reason. Why? Because Allah is Hakim. All right. So this is this is probably not how we would describe Hakim, Allah being Hakim, but from Ghazali's perspective, you can understand the importance of him doing so in that manner. It's interesting to see actually what. So this is what the way Tawson Barak takes it. Al-Hakim, he is perfectly wise. He is the perfectly wise in his knowledge and in his deeds. There is no doubt or uncertainty in his knowledge, nor does it have a limit. Neither is there any doubt or uncertainty in his commandments. Whoever follows them will learn from the reflection of his perfect knowledge, many crucial things otherwise unattainable, and evolve towards being a perfect human being. One who does not follow Allah's orders will not receive good or benefit. He will not grow, but will dry up, becoming fuel for the hellfire. That which teaches us wisdom is fear of Allah. The one who is truly wise is the one who is the master of his ego. He prepares in this life for the hereafter. The one who is a willing slave to the desires of his flesh and still hopes for God's forgiveness, hopes in vain. Okay? So, when you think about it, how is it that you would actually go about translating Al-Hakim? What does wise mean in relation to God? Yeah, and Ghazali actually, not in here, and not even in his works of, not in his big works of theology, but in the Qawaid al-Aqaid, right at the beginning, Allah says, Ghazali says, Allah is Hakim fi af'alihi. He is entirely wise in his actions. Right, and here I said Ghazali is going towards a, that statement in a theological work is very interesting and somewhat provocative because it's kind of a Maturidi way of thinking about things. From Ghazali, the arch Ashari, it's a rather Maturidi way of thinking about things, that what God decrees is not merely, well, that's just what, God willed it and that's that. Yeah? He can will what he likes. But this idea that what God wills has wisdom. Okay? You go back, those of you who've done the theology, go back to the Mu'tazili position that God is bound to do what is good. God must do the good. Okay? The Ashari position, which is that God can do whatever he likes without any restriction whatsoever. And you have in the middle of that, you have the Maturidi position, which is that God can do whatever he wishes, but what he does do is full of wisdom. Yeah, it's kind of a halfway house between those two rather extreme positions. I've always maintained that the Asharis are taking a deliberately extreme position, and theologically bringing about the notion of a capricious God, a God who can just do what he wants to do, and who does, not can, who does just do what he wants to do. Yeah, which does not actually sound like the God of Scripture. Yeah, the God of Scripture, the God of the Quran, the God of the Hadith, does things with clear reasoning, with clear wisdom. And so I very much hold, and I'm sure more more loyal Asharis would find a way around what I'm saying. But I'm very much of the opinion that the Maturidi position on this is a much more sensible position. Yeah, that God can do as He wishes, but does do what is wise. Right? But you can see that's not the approach Ghazali is taking in explaining what Al-Hakim is. Yeah.
And isn't that what the Ashari believe? As in God can do whatever He wants, but He does the good. So,
the Asharis stay very quiet about it. They believe, they do obviously believe it, but they don't state it as a theological principle. That's the difference. So you ask an Ashari, does God do what is good? Yeah. Yeah. Must God do what is good? Now you're in a theological, no, God doesn't have to do what is good. Okay, or what we consider to be good. All right. And then, you know, when in and you know, one thing you need to understand about kalam is that kalam is a dialectic, right? It's about a position taken in the context of an argument, in the context of a debate. And sometimes you take a stand in a debate that is it is deliberately and a deliberately extreme stance to distinguish you very clearly from somebody taking another extreme stance. So if the argument is God must do what is good, yeah, then the opposite position that you stand with is God does what He wishes. Right? God does not have to do what is good. He does as He wishes. If you would say God can do whatever He wishes, but He does do what is good, what you're now doing is you're kind of moving towards the other position, and there's a risk of a person sliding into, and therefore God, if He invariably does what is good, then He must do what is good. You know, so you kind of take that stance. The Maturidis didn't have the same sort of issues, I suppose you might say, as the Asharis did, which historically is quite interesting, given that actually where the Mu'tazila actually thrived in the 3rd, 4th, 5th centuries was precisely where the Maturidis were, actually, which was Persia. Yeah. You know, where they struggled was in places like Baghdad and the Western Islamic world, where the Asharis were. Yeah. But initially, the initial kind of Mu'tazila, you know, development of the great Mu'tazila scholars had actually been in Baghdad. So at the time of Imam al-Ashari, that's really where the conflict was occurring. Imam Maturidi was around at the same time as Imam al-Ashari, but perhaps didn't have, you know, such sharp differences of opinion. And also, of course, Imam Maturidi was never a Mu'tazila to begin with, whereas Imam al-Ashari, of course, started off as a Mu'tazila. And you've got that kind of, there is an element, I think, with Imam al-Ashari of kind of convertitus. He kind of, you know, flips completely over to this side. When he flips completely. There's this lovely, probably made up story, but it's a lovely story nonetheless. That Imam al-Ashari, you know, as a Mu'tazila, young Mu'tazila, he has this dream. He sees the Prophet ﷺ, yeah, and the Prophet ﷺ says, "Why have you left my words? Why have you left my Sunnah for the philosophers, basically?" You know, and Imam al-Ashari goes, "Oh my God!" You know, he goes completely to the other extreme and becomes a full-on kind of Ahlul Hadith, sort of Wahhabi type, basically, right? Athari, yeah. And then he has another dream of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet says, "Okay, chill out, man," basically, and then he kind of comes back and moderates, you know. That, you know, that's probably made up, but there is a sense of, you know, Imam Ashari both having to within for himself distinguish himself from Mu'tazili belief, but also I think in the eyes of the Ahlul Hadith scholars, so so your Ahmad bin Hanbals and people like that, you know, making it very clear that he's not a Mu'tazila. Yeah. So, you know, there is this kind of, okay, is he kind of, is this switch? Has he kind of switched, but still retained some traces of this, you know, that sort of stuff. So I think there is an element of that with Imam al-Ashari. With that does not seem to be the case for Imam Maturidi. He seems to develop very much out of an early Hanafi approach to these things. And the Hanafi approach to these things, in any case, was not the same as a Hanbali approach that you would find in Baghdad and places like that. Yeah, the Hanafis have always been a bit more, had a bit. They were always Ahlul Ra'i. They were always, when this whole, Ahlul Hadith, Ahlul Ra'i, the whole distinction. You didn't do the theology classes, did you?
Yeah.
Then how can you not know the Ahlul Ra'i, people of opinion, Ahlul Hadith, the people of scripture. There have always been a question of who are these people. In the very, very early years, it was the Hanafi. The Hanafis were the Ahlul Ra'i. Yeah? Because they were the ones who you give them a hadith and they say, but you see the Quran says this, and then, by qiyas we know this, and blah, blah, blah. And astaghfirullah, I think here's a hadith and you're talking about opinions. Yeah? Later on, the Ahlul Ra'i became the Mu'tazila. People who relied on reason and so forth. And the Ahlul Hadith were then the if you like, the more orthodox or Athari type theologians, people like Ahmad bin Hanbal and those sorts of stuff. And as time goes on, there have always been people who've kind of been given this pejorative, the Ahlul Ra'i, and the other pejorative, the Ahlul Hadith. So even even in India in the 18th century, yeah, you have the Ahlul Hadith or the Ahlul Hadith, right? And they would call the Hanafis the Ahlul Ra'i. Okay, so there's always this, this tension. I think Imam Maturidi's pathway was not as dramatic and as interesting as Imam Ashari's in terms of his own personal pathway, and hence I think that has rubbed off on some of the theology. Anyway, so Ghazali is looking at the name Al-Hakim very much in the context, I think, here of his times. He's not actually talking about wisdom. Okay? So if you look just a little bit further down, the one who knows God is wise, even if his aptitude may be deficient in other conventional modes of knowledge, or his speech be slow and faltering in expounding them. Nonetheless, comparing man's wisdom to the wisdom of God is like comparing his knowledge to God's knowledge of his essence. What a difference there is between two modes of knowing. Then he says a bit later on, the discourse of one who knows God is different from that of others. Rarely does he concern himself with particulars. Rather, he speaks of matters universal in scope. I just pause that for a second. That's exactly the point of philosophy. That philosophy is to speak about universals. Philosophy is the knowledge of universals. Every other knowledge is the knowledge of particulars. Yeah, and you can see that Ghazali, in describing Al-Hakim, is doing so very much from the standpoint, is doing so from the standpoint of the situation in his times. Okay, he takes a rather different approach to God being Hakim in some of his theological works, where he then talks about God's wisdom in his actions, which is much more how we might describe what Al-Hakim means. Yeah, that God is not only all-knowing, but he is wise. So wisdom here is a relationship between knowledge and God's will. Okay, so there is God's knowledge, God's will, and you might also say God's benevolence. And when you put those three things together, what you come out with is a wise decision. A decision that it's a decision. So wisdom in God's wisdom in his actions is about a decision that he takes, but a decision that he takes on the basis of knowledge, considering what will bring benefit. Considering what ultimately will bring benefit. Okay? All right, so this is the this is Al-Hakim. But we will look at it inshallah in much more detail. Ghazali goes on to talk about the Prophet ﷺ being merciful, and gives a whole number of hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ indicating the wisdom of the Prophet ﷺ, but also how the Prophet ﷺ looked at the concept of wisdom. So, for example, silence is wisdom, but few manage it. Okay, perseverance is half of faith, sabr is half of faith, yaqeen, certainty, is all of faith, and so forth. Okay? Okay, so we move on. And as we said, that the concept of Hakim links to the concept of God's knowledge, which is part of the name that we mentioned previously, Al-Wasi. Okay, but it also links to the concept of God's benevolence. Hence, the next name is Al-Wadud. Is Al-Wadud, the loving. God is the loving. هو الذي يحب الخير لجميع الخلق فيحسن إليهم ويثنى عليهم وهو قريب بمعنى الرحيم، لكن الرحمة إضافة إلى المرحوم، والمرحوم هو المحتاج والمضطر، وأفعال الرحيم تستعدي مرحوما ضعيفا، وأفعال الودود لا يستعدي ذلك، بل الإنعام على سبيل الابتداء من نتائج الود، وكما أن معنى رحمته عز وجل إرادة الخير للمرحوم وكفايته له، وهو منزه عن رقة الرحمة، وكذلك وده إرادته الكرامة والنعمة وإحسانه إنعامه، وهو منزه عن ميل المودة والرحمة، لكن المودة والرحمة لا تراد في حق المرحوم والمودود إلا لثمرتهما وفائدتهما لا لرقتها والميل and so forth. Okay, so Ghazali says Al-Wadud, the loving kind, the one who wishes, the benevolent, you might say, the benevolent, okay? The one who wishes good, wishes all good for all creatures, and accordingly favors them and praises them. Its meaning is close to Ar-Rahim, to the merciful, but the difference here is a difference of extent. Rahmah implies need. The nature of Rahmah is that it is, or the definition, if you like, of Rahmah is to desire and work for the good for those who are in need. Okay, so Rahmah is fundamentally about the alleviation of hardship and suffering, right? It implies that the recipient of Rahmah is in need of something. Okay? Wadud does not have that implication. It is simply the wishing of good, full stop, with the desire that good come to others, full stop, whether they are in need or not. So Ghazali says, mercy is linked to the one who receives mercy, and the one who receives mercy is necessarily in need. The actions of the merciful presuppose there being one who is weak, and hence needs mercy, while the actions of the loving kind, Al-Wadud, do not require that. Rather, bestowing favors from the outset results from loving kindness. Just as the meaning of mercy consists in God's intending the well-being of the one who receives mercy and giving him what he needs, right? Whilst God is free from he's translated riqqa as empathy, okay? But here we might say compassion, usually associated with mercy. So does the loving kind, and so does his loving kindness consist of his intending honor and blessing in his favor and grace, while he transcends the natural inclination usually associated with love and mercy. So, to put that another way, have you heard the argument that everything that a human being does fundamentally is selfish? Fundamentally, everything a human being does returns to that human being. Okay? So how is compassion selfish? How can compassion be selfish? Okay? And compassion is selfish in the sense that, well, there is a benefit to the self, in the sense that compassion arises out of a feeling of pain. Okay, when you see somebody in suffering, you feel pain. You feel a disquiet in your soul. Your amygdala kicks in. It's a structure in your brain. Your amygdala kicks in. Right? So you see someone suffering, and that part of your brain kicks in and creates a feeling of discomfort in you. A feeling of suffering alongside. When you alleviate the suffering of the person who is in need, the amygdala quietens down. Right? And your own feeling of pain goes away. To put it another way, you are happy when other people are happy. You are sad when other people are sad. Hence, compassion is to suffer along with someone, to feel what that person feels. And hence, although mercy is the highest of all qualities, there is a selfish, and when I say selfish, I don't mean that in a negative sense, but I mean a benefit that returns to the self. There is a selfish component to it. Okay? God's mercy is utterly unlike human mercy because it does not arise from that impulse. God does not have an amygdala. Okay? God does not feel pain when creation or others are in pain. God sends forth his mercy nonetheless. All right? And this is really critical to understand, this idea that our Lord is merciful despite not feeling the suffering of others as we feel the suffering of others. Yeah? Why? Because it means that his removing harm, his bestowal of good, his alleviating need is entirely and utterly selfless. It is entirely and utterly for the sake of the one who is in need. Okay? Now consider theologically that one of the justifications for the incarnation theory, that is to say, God became a human being in the form of Jesus, the primary reason given for that is that God, unable to feel the suffering of humanity, could not truly understand what it meant to be human. And the only way for that to happen was for God to become human, to feel the suffering of humanity, and then to be merciful to them. That allows the mercy to flow. All right? There is this idea at the root of that you can't truly be merciful if you don't feel the pain. Okay? You can't truly be merciful if you don't feel the pain. Okay? And our understanding of this is that that is not the case. That is not the case. And in fact, that is what makes God's mercy so astounding. Okay? Is that his knowledge is so perfect that he has knowledge of feelings. How is it that God is aware? How are you aware of the suffering of others? Part of your awareness of the suffering of others is your knowledge. Okay? But your awareness of what that suffering means is the emotional reaction that you have, is the pain that you feel when experiencing that person's suffering. And it is that, not so much the knowledge, it is that that prompts your generosity, that prompts your compassion. All right? Okay? Mothers who are breastfeeding will sometimes describe when the baby cries a physical feeling of pain when the baby is crying. Yeah? What makes the milk flow? Baby starts crying and the milk starts to flow. That's a physical reaction to a to something you heard. Yeah, what is it that prompts it? It's a very complex, oxytocin in a nutshell, but it's a very complex oxytocin and prolactin, but it's a very complex process that occurs. Yeah, inside the brains of living things or mammals. It's not just human beings; it's mammals generally. Okay, but it is about a change that occurs inside you. And a feeling, a psychological distress that you experience, all right, that that makes you, that actually manifests that compassion to others. Okay? And it works in reverse, that by manifesting compassion to others, your suffering can be relieved. Your psychological suffering can be relieved. Yeah, so that pathway works in reverse. Yeah, you can reduce suffering by being your own suffering, by being compassionate to others. Okay, but Ghazali is saying God is munazzahun an hadha. He is free from this in terms of his rahmah. Similarly, mawadda, which is love, is desiring good for one who isn't in need, but you just want good for them anyway. So if you like, if rahmah is to take you from, from -1 to 0, then mawadda is for you to go from 0 to 1. Okay, it's that you get more. Allah, it's not a coincidence that Allah, when He's talking about marriage, talks about وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ, God placed between you مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً, love and mercy. Okay, so a desire that good come to your spouse when everything's a-okay, and a desire that good come to them when they are in need of good. Two different things, right? And what is it? If it is that pain, the internal pain, the riqqa, that's the riqqa. If it's that internal pain that prompts the rahmah, what is it that prompts the mawadda? What is it that makes you love someone? What makes you compassionate to someone is that they're in need. What is it that makes you love someone? And that isn't just an inclination, a natural inclination in the heart. Okay? It is something that simply occurs. I mean, we can go into dopamine and other stuff, but it's just a natural inclination you have. And because you have a natural inclination to that person, you want to give them things, and you want them, you want to see them laugh and whatever it happens to be. They don't need to be in need, yeah, but you just want good for them. That's mawadda. Okay? It's prompted by a natural inclination. That inclination may be, if they're happy, then I'm happy. Yeah? If they're happy, when they feel happy, I feel happy. So if rahmah is, if they feel sad, I feel sad, make it as simple as possible. If rahmah is, if they feel sad, I feel sad, I want them not to feel sad, then I won't feel sad. Rahmah. If mawadda is, when they're happy, I'm happy, I want to be happy, so let me make them happy. Right? That's mawadda. That's mawadda. It returns to something. So you get something back. God gets nothing back. Right? And this is, although you have hadiths, about Allah being happy, right? And these hadiths link primarily to tawbah, that God becomes happy when a servant makes tawbah. And the way this is described in one of the hadiths is amazing. Because God becomes happy is not even the word, ecstatic is the word. Ecstatic. Yeah? And this famous hadith of the guy who loses his camel in the middle of the desert. The Prophet gives this analogy. The guy, he's in the middle of the desert. His camel's got all his, he's got all his food, provisions, etc., on him. And the camel runs. And the guy chases after the camel and loses the camel. Camel is gone. This guy's in the middle of the desert. He's got nothing with him. Right? That's it. That's kaput. Yeah? Shakes his fist at the sky, does whatever it happens to be, and then he just, in the distance, he sees a tree. And he says, forget it, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die in the shade. Yeah? And he goes over to the tree, stumbles over the tree, and he just slumps down, with his back against this tree and thinks, forget it. I'm just going to sit here now until I die. He's given up all hope. Yeah? And then suddenly he opens his eyes and his camel is standing there grinning at him. And he stands up and he grabs the reins of the camel. And he says, Allahumma anta abdi wa ana rabbuk. Oh my Lord, you are my slave and I'm your Lord. Yeah, he's got so happy his words got mixed up. He meant to say, oh Allah, I am your slave and you are my Lord, but he was so happy his words got mixed up. Yeah, the Prophet says, when one of you makes tawbah, Allah is even happier than that. And that man is in that moment, Allah is even happier than that. Now can you, what? From you making tawbah? What does God have to gain from you making tawbah? Nothing. Nothing at all. Yeah? So why is he happy? He's happy because that is the means to your salvation. Because you have benefited. Allah has nothing to gain. It is not Allah's, there's no natural inclination. There's no dopamine. Yeah? There's nothing like that that's happening within Allah to bring about love. Allah loves because Allah is loving. That is his nature. He gains nothing from his love as he gains nothing from his mercy. It is his nature. And hence, it is entirely selfless. Just as God's mercy is selfless, God's love is selfless.
You're saying by compassion and like that, yeah, us having compassion is the difference between God having God's mercy and ours. But then in saying that, have you seen the film Vogue by Hitchcock? Have you seen the film Vogue by Hitchcock?
No, that's far too cultured for me.
It's the idea of people being superior, those who don't conform to the morality of the general public. So what conform to the general morality of the general public. So in the film, what they do is kill someone and think we'll get away with them, not even care about it. We don't have a conscience, and then therefore we feel we're higher. But in that respect, if someone has no compassion for anyone, i.e., they're not affected when they just don't care, but they do things that help them, it's completely selfless because they don't actually have any benefit. So would that be a higher compassion than someone who does feel that?
I would argue that for a person who does not have natural feelings of compassion, to act compassionately, yeah, simply because it is the right thing to do, yeah, their action is a better or more sincere action than the one who does so because of a pain in their heart. However, the one who has the pain in their heart is much more likely to be compassionate and much more likely to be able to manifest compassion. I think that's the difference. I get what you're saying. At the end of the day, the reward for something done with difficulty is greater than the reward for something done with ease. So a person who is, for me to restrain my temper when I'm pretty easygoing, I'd be rewarded for restraining my temper, restraining my anger, but not as much as someone who was quick-tempered or bad-tempered. The effort they would have had to go through to restrain their anger would be much, much greater. Yeah. Similarly, the reward for a generous person giving is, is there, but the reward for and this is the pure act itself. The reward for the one who is stingy giving is greater. Yeah. The generous person, however, is much more likely to be generous much more of the time. So it kind of balances out, as it were.
Then would you say it's almost inhuman not to feel pain? Like, for example, you see kids in Africa and they're starving.
Yes.
You give money.
It's a human thing. It's one of the things that God has blessed. It's not even a human thing. It's actually a mammalian thing. But yeah, it would be. It is a defect. There's no question about that. Not having those feelings is a defect. Yeah. And I mean, biologically, it's a defect. It's a hypoactive amygdala, but it manifests other benefits. I mean, at the end of the day, if a person who doesn't feel the suffering of others feels their own suffering less as well. A person who doesn't feel, a person who has difficulty with compassion also has difficulty with fear. I mean, you're in a war, you're in the trenches. You want to be standing next to a psychopath. Yeah, because they won't be afraid. They're not afraid like you are. Yeah, and that's why often the kind of the Rambo type war heroes, are the ones that have the greatest difficulty readjusting to society. Yeah. But anyway. Yeah, but no, I think it is a defect, but the reward for acting, notwithstanding that, the reward of acting on principle would be greater. Yeah. Okay. I'm doing for time. Okay. Right.
Sorry, can I ask
Yes.
just what you just said now, not having absolutely is a defect, biological. I just want to think of what you said last week, which is that are early experiences. So I'm thinking essentially the baseline is we all have these emotions, and is it that, I suppose it's a combination, isn't it? But we have biological influence, but also how tuned into these emotions we are depend on our early experiences.
Yes, agree.
So if that's out of your control, I'll use an extreme example, like a dictator. If he's been abused by his parents, his whole, you look at some of them, abusive childhood, how accountable are they for their actions later on in life?
Yeah, good question. So the question of accountability and how much of your accountability effectively is about your conscience. Yes, whether that conscience is the conscience your only guide, that presupposes that conscience is your only guide to morality. Okay, and if conscience were the only guide to morality, if you for whatever reason had an attenuated conscience or a weak conscience or no conscience at all, whether for biological reasons, whether because of trauma you experienced in childhood or how you were raised or whatever, or something like that, okay, then yes, you could make the argument that such a person should not be accountable. Okay, however, it is not precisely the fact that it is not the only standard of morality, that you actually, what you have is a rational standard of morality that is set up through revelation. Or I should say, a rationally understandable standard of morality, okay, which is God's guidance to man. The whole point of the guidance is to help to guide your conscience if you have one, and to replace your conscience if you don't, you might say. Yeah. So the point is that is something that is there. Now, the guidance, I don't just mean here the Quran and Sunnah. I mean the guidance from the time of Adam alayhi salam. Okay, much of that is found in social law, and this is why the argument in the movie that you're talking about is a fundamental misunderstanding of why societies have certain moral codes and certain moral standards. Many of the fundamental ones are remnants of revelatory guidance. So you don't have to go into the distant past here. Okay, the UN Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 was written by Catholic priests. Yeah, and the idea was and they brought together lots of people, people from China and here and whatever it happens to be, and what do we all agree on, effectively. And so it's a secular document, but it is a secular document that is deeply informed by Christian ethic. Yeah, so the right to life, thou shalt not kill. The right to property, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's oxen, and whatever it happens to be. These things, you'd be surprised how much of our law, the common law of this country, is derived from Judeo-Christian biblical teachings. Okay, how much of very secular things like declarations of human rights are derived from religious guidance, and the same thing applies if you go back in history. Yeah, a lot of these, the ideas, the concept that most human beings have found it the most difficult to hold on to is the notion of one God. Is actually the theological bit. The thing that they found it the easiest to hold on to is the ethical guidance of religions, actually. Yeah, and that may be a remnant. I mean, I have this theory about Adam alayhi salam, that the idea that the guidance given to Adam alayhi salam is something that is so fundamental that it was in some way imprinted in our DNA. That the guidance given to Adam alayhi salam was God teaching him all the names, and it's the reason that all human beings, even if they've had no contact with any civilization for thousands of years, have the same basic moral code. Killing is a bad thing. Well, general killing is a bad thing. Yeah, taking other people's property is a bad thing. Sexual impropriety is a bad thing. And these are things that you can, the argument is that these are remnants of evolutionary psychology. Oh, this is from, these things have come from evolutionary psychology. Our argument would be, in a way, yeah, but they are things that are, if you like, they are from the Sharia of Adam alayhi salam. Yeah, they are from the Sharia of Adam alayhi salam. They are so deeply ingrained into human beings that they effectively now become part of our DNA. That the Sharia of Adam alayhi salam is actually the conscience. It is those basic moral principles that societies hold themselves to. Yeah. So the point is, the guidance of God through revelation is there to guide your conscience if you have one, or to replace your conscience if you don't. And because of that, whether you hold yourself to explicitly revelatory moral codes, or you hold yourself to their remnants, their artifacts, which are societal norms and so forth, you are bound by those, and you should be bound by those. Yeah. Okay. Let's leave it at that for today, inshallah. Because it's a good place to start looking at Al-Mujib. So next is Al-Mujib Al-Ba'ith, Al-Shahid Al-Haq. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.